People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Given you everything you've ever wanted. How can you do this to us?
Got this nice house, your own car, a swimming pool. What more do you want?
I want to be a star.
Hello, Eve Harrington.
I'm finally going to meet a real man.
Richard Nixon is a lesbian. I didn't know that.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Ms. Rahne Alexander.
Hello.
Also joining us for the first time is Ms. Elizabeth Purchell.
Hey there.
We wrap up our month discussing hard-to-find, lost, and underseen films with a discussion of Scarecrow in a Garden of Cucumbers. This is one of the few success stories we have this month, as Scarecrow was thought to have been lost for many years, but has since been found and restored and will hopefully be available on Blu-ray in June of this year. Scarecrow is the story of Eve Harrington, played by Holly Woodlawn, a young woman from Kansas who comes to the big city and encounters a whole lot of unusual characters who, like Eve, share names with other film characters. I'm not sure if we can spoil this film via our discussion, but we sure are going to try. So if you don't want anything ruined, turn off the podcast and track down the movie. We will still be here eating ice cream. Rahne, was this a first-time watch for you?
It was. I hadn't really even paid attention to its existence until you brought it up to me. I'm still singing songs from it in my head. I will wax excessively in the coming minutes on this podcast.
And Elizabeth, I know this wasn't a first-time watch for you. When was the first time you saw this?
The first time I saw this film was 3 or 4 years ago at this point. It was a film that I had been aware of for a long time. I think either through Holly Woodlawn's memoir, Low Life in High Heels, or just researching her and lost films in general. A friend of mine was able to get a video transfer that was done at some point in the 80s and snuck it to me. When I watched it, I was like, Holly Woodlawn is wonderful. Callie Brown is wonderful. I don't know about the rest of the movie, but I think that was mostly just because of the poor quality. And then when I finally got a chance to show the restoration, I did a screening of it in early 2023 at Alamo in Austin. That was when it really fully clicked with me, and I realized just how wonderful the film is and how much it plays with an audience, even now, all these years later.
It's a really unusual film. It's interesting that Callie Brown is in this because it reminds me of another film. I think probably the only other thing that I've seen her in. I know she was in a few things, but it reminds me a lot of Brand X, the Chamberlain film, and just that kind of out there stream of consciousness feel to it. Though I have to say that I think Scarecrow is definitely a much more structured film. And I don't know, it's fun. And this movie is so much fun. Like you talked about watching it with an audience. I can't even imagine watching this with an audience because just in my own living room, I was like, wow, this is great. There's some really good jokes in there. And I could see, had I seen this movie 20, 30 years ago, I'd probably be quoting from it very regularly just because there are a lot of great lines to this one.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really want to see this in a group setting. There's so much going on in many of the frames, too, that I was glad to be able to watch it a couple of times before we got to record this podcast. Because there's, definitely things that I missed the first time that I had to stop and rewind a little bit. There's a sequence where our heroine is looking for a roommate and she ends up in one of the possible rooms, and the insufferable roommate feeds her a milk-bone dog biscuit. oh my God, is that a Milk-Bone dog biscuit box? Freeze, rewind, and, just that little touch is, it's not even acknowledged that it's a dog biscuit, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff just going on behind the scenes with this one. Just a lot of stuff. Just a lot of odd things that it's doing. You mentioned the roommates, the twins are great, and just how they turn out to be like total manhunters, the way that they're completing each other's sentences and everything. I was like, okay, I didn't expect this. They just seemed like such wholesome American girls, but then they end up being like vicious man-haters.
Do you think maybe you can help me find a nice man?
A man. Men are nothing but little boys who've never grown up. They're selfish, evil, egotistical, sex crazy, and repressed. You don't need a man in this day and age. We are strengthening ourselves so we can do the work of 10 men, give up antiquated ideas, and join us in wombs. Women over men bring sunshine.
Yeah, I think it's a film that's just so overeager to please that it just mines every possible joke, even if it's not funny. But because it's going at such a rapid pace, even when they're not landing, they're also landing a split second later. So it just seems like the entire movie is wall-to-wall funny, even if it's very up and down at points. And it's something where I just wonder how it originally was envisioned, because like so many of the gags, like the whole thing was Mrs. Miniver who's calling her throughout the film, or the thing with the sausage order, or the ice cream cone jokes, or like what was all that meant to be, and like how was this fixed in post in a way that just adds this like layer of psychic disorientation to it that makes it so much more enjoyable than it probably was like initially intended to be.
Brandix reminded me of something very stream of consciousness, though I know it probably wasn't. It just feels like all of these pieces are interconnected. Like you mentioned the ice cream thing. And at first I didn't even realize that was going to be a running joke, but then it ended up being a running joke, and it just keeps coming back and they keep playing with it. At first I was just like, okay, this is going to be a young girl comes to the big city and quickly gets disillusioned. Like there's the guy, can't remember if he brings up her bags or no, he knocks on her door very soon after she arrives, and she goes to the Chelsea Hotel after she's driven there by a foul-talking nun who is fantastic. But the guy who comes in, he's just like, oh yeah, I'm looking for the $5.95 blowjob. And I was like, oh geez, here we go. She's going to be, tempted into this life of prostitution. No, she's not going to be tempted into a life of prostitution. She's just going to find out who in this city gives $5.95 blowjobs. It happens to be one of her best friends, apparently. And then it becomes the quest for the roommate pretty soon after that. And that really takes up the majority of the film. Like, I think all the way up until the end when she finally finds an okay roommate. Who's that? Her brother, Joe Buck, the roommate's brother, the one who reminds me of Natasha from
Right. Yeah, they're siblings.
Rocky and Bullwinkle. Yeah. And then right towards the end, it's like, oh no, I'm done with this city. I'm going to Hollywood. This city isn't good enough for me. But along the way, the pace of everything, it never really takes a break, which I really appreciate.
I mean, it does bring to mind the question, why didn't she go to Hollywood in the first place?
Maybe her pantsless parents couldn't have handled that. Really, that's the first joke of the movie, right? When her parents turn around and walk away and neither one of them are wearing pants.
And I will say the original version of the film that I saw however many years ago, which was like a video transfer, it was so bad you couldn't even make out the fact that they're not wearing pants. So like the quality was so bad that the jokes weren't even there.
What I love about her portrayal, like she really nails this ingenue thing in a way that is very broad, very slapsticky, but also it's almost believable, even though we as a wise audience are seeing Holly Woodlawn. We know she's seen some things as an actual human being, but, she's got this joke early on about the Chelsea Hotel. Sounds nice, right? So she gets a room at the Chelsea Hotel, which apparently many people haven't heard of in the film, which is also very funny. Is immediately, as you say, commissioned for fellatio for $5.95, which, okay, $5.90, like there's what, with tax, is this what we're saying here? $5.95. she says no, she slams the door, she's not going to do it. And then within 2 or 3 more minutes, we repeat the joke, but she asks, what's fellatio? And it's like, it's a line the first time that I watched it, I did not catch that at all. Like the second time, I'm like, oh my God, she like actually has no idea. And I mean, as something of a corn-fed ingenue myself in my young years, how many times have I had a scene in my own life where that feels very resonant?
I do want to note that with inflation, $5.95 is about $45. It's still a bargain.
Yeah, Holly Woodlawn's performance in this is just amazing. She pulls these faces, like when she's in the back of that cab and you just see all of the expressions on her face. When the elevator doors open and there's the guy with the gas mask and those crazy sleeves. I don't know what's going on with that guy's sleeves. He looks like he's just from a rocket ship or something. And you see her as soon as the doors open, she's got this great scared look on her face, like super broad. It's almost like she's acting in a silent movie is how broad her face gets sometimes with some of these looks. Or like when somebody calls up and she doesn't recognize the voice and has these big eyes and stuff. I love the physicality of her performance too, where running across the street, there's a scene later on where she's running and trying to find a phone booth and she just keeps going from phone booth to phone booth. And she's got decent legs and everything, but the way she runs, she looks like she's a chicken or something. And I'm just like, the physicality that you are able to pull off is really nice.
She's the trans Lucille Ball.
I was going to say Bugs Bunny, but I think both ways work. Also, I think trans Bugs Bunny is kind of an oxymoron. Maybe,
I would agree with that as well.
Yeah. What do y'all think of those scenes where, so I think it happens like 2 or 3 times in the movie where the movie will just be playing and then it feels like we go into a flashback or a dream. I'm not exactly sure what that is. There's one point where she's on the phone and I guess it's a fantasy, but it also kind of looks like a flashback to her getting off of the bus. And then all of these people on these stairs, and you have these 3 kind of heavy women that all take off their skirts. They've got these like pink skirts underneath. And that kind of stuff happens at least 2 or 3 times where we just kind of move into these sequences and she'll still be talking over them. So it's not like she's remembering. What do you make of those?
No, that's what I was kind of saying. Like, I was wondering if that was stuff that just didn't work and it was just their way of fixing it in post, or, how do we either make time or how do we get this stuff in a way where it makes sense? ? I don't know. It's such a weird narrative thing to do.
It is, but I also think this really settled in with the black and white, the film sequence where, basically she imagines herself as a Shirley Temple-esque character walking up the stairs, which is actually just a very touching and, just a kind of a raw moment, like a very unexpectedly raw moment in this very broad and goofy film. But I mean, I think, she's dealing with trauma here. Like she's reflecting on traumas. The sequence Lily Tomlin makes a off-camera appearance doing her operator character that we all became familiar with later. That whole sequence, which is kind of this goof on this payphone idea they're making a joke out of, is backed by arguably a scene of sexual assault, which is kind of misty and hard to discern why it's coming up, but it's clearly this internal experience. And I mean, I think that if we look at it from the strict narrative of the film, these are the things that she's thinking about, why New York is not the place for her. She's got to go somewhere else. I mean, I think this is how they all link together, these internal dialogues or internal monologues, I guess I should say, that she's experiencing, and maybe even just a little bit of disassociation. And like, who amongst us, especially if you're trans, don't have a really deep familiarity with disassociation?
Yeah, I was trying to remember the sexual assault part of it because I definitely remember the little girl that's going in there. Is that also the same sequence where it's the musical number or that's all black and white?
That's at the end of the acting school sequence. Sepia sequence is the song that's sung by Bette Midler, who I believe sings multiple songs in the film. She does the title theme and that one, yeah.
That's right. It's called Strawberries or something, I think.
Strawberries, Lilac, and Lime.
It's pretty amazing just that it was Bette Midler doing these songs all the way back then. This is really, because I'm trying to remember when her first album came out. I want to say it was 72 as well, but she was so involved in all these different scenes, and especially like the artist scene. I mean, when I was younger, it seemed so strange to me that she ended up marrying one of the Kipper kids. And I was like, well, that's such a weird combination, because I'm thinking of Bette Midler, like Wind Beneath My Wings, Bette Midler, rather than Divine Miss M type Bette Midler, where I'm like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Like really being into that like Mondo, New York type scene. I'm like, all right, I get this now.
She came up performing in the bathhouses along with Barry Manilow and a lot of others. Looks like that.
I can't get over how good this movie looks. It is astounding. I mean, Elizabeth, you talked about how seeing it in that shitty VHS version, just how much you were missing. And I understand because I've seen a lot of bad VHS transfers over the years and a lot of bootleg stuff that you're just like, oh my God, I can barely make out the image to this. But this restored version of it just looks so good. And more than that, it sounds amazing. And those songs that we hear throughout, especially the one that gets repeated a few times where it's Bette and I can't remember the name of the singer, but a male singer going back and forth. Those are amazing sequences. And yeah, the sound during that part. And I love that I could hear every bit of dialogue. Like you said, Rahne, I had to go back and watch it a couple times just because the jokes do come fast and furious. I'm like, okay, I missed that one before. I almost, I'm excited to buy the Blu-ray of this because I'm hoping there's some subtitle tracks on here because that's how I end up watching most of my movies these days because I miss so much.
Yeah, and I will say, too, if you ever get a chance to see it in the theater, the Academy did strike a brand new, I believe, all photochemical 35mm print, too. So that exists as well. But yeah, I mean, it's such a beautifully shot film. I think it's an early work by Paul Glickman, who went on to work with Larry Cohen very heavily, along with Radley Metzger. So I feel like you kind of get like the guerrilla shooting style of Larry Cohen, and then also just the lushness and production design overload of like Radley Metzger in the film.
Yeah, like those scenes in Central Park. It's such a nice time capsule of what Central Park looked like back then. But then, yeah, seeing it with the beautiful colors, I mean, those greens and everything just really stand out. And it feels like we just filmed this yesterday.
And everybody looks like they're having so much fun. I mean, it was such a joy to rewatch because of that, where how many films do I see now that look like they're actually fun to make? I don't feel like that exists so much in current film. And it made me yearn for that. It's what gives me so much joy watching films from this time period, even when they're lower budget, when they've got the problems that come along with a lower budget.
They're trying some real different stuff. I've mentioned sepia tone, black and white. We've talked about musical sequences. I mean, even like the introduction of Tally Brown as Mary Poppins, the way she's being carried across by all those men and the way she comes down the stairs and all that. I mean, it's like taking, a musical number and then slowing it down and just showing like how much fun, again, like you said, Rahne, how much fun she's having. And yeah, everybody seems to be just really tuned into this. Everyone who is in this movie is just acting at the storm. And I love this whole like melodramatic way that they approach everything. And then just like the little stupid stuff, like our friend, so she's Eve, then who's the other one? Margot Channing, how she invites her out to Central Park for a boat ride and then makes Eve, row the boat. And it's just like, she can't catch a break, she just constantly is like the butt of the joke.
It's because she dresses like she watches Pat Boone records. One of the things that I loved about the Mary Poppins character, well, okay, a couple. One of them is that she's the villain, right? Or seemingly one of the villains, I guess. So Mary Poppins as a villain. But she really prefigures Queen Carlotta from the John Waters universe in so many ways. And it's impossible for me to separate the two of them. There's so much of that same vibe, maybe they would be rival queens in some kind of, whatever that version of Manhattan is versus Mortville. I think that would be a movie I would love to see.
It's like Superman versus Batman, but a movie I actually want to see.
I mean, I feel like as someone who lives in New York, I feel like anyone involved in housing is the ultimate villain. So I guess she's not technically a landlord, but she is a broker.
Well, and a purveyor of computer dating with her computer system named Heathcliff. I have to imagine that that's a Heights reference because it feels like everybody in this movie, I mean, we've mentioned Eve and Margot and Joe Buck and Mary Poppins. And then at one point, Eve is at a party and she gets picked up by a man named Rhett Butler. An amazing use of split screen and then just doubles and everything to have Holly playing both of those roles. And I kept looking there's one part where they're standing, there's a fan in the middle, and it's Holly as Rhett on one side and Holly as Eve on the other side. I'm like, I don't see the seam. I imagine it has to be that pull of the fan, but everything looks really nice to me. This is, 1972 this was made, and it looks terrific.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been watching this film in this historical moment for me is amazing because I feel like I'm really in my dual role era. I've seen Sinners twice. I just saw Mickey 17 finally. Even the most recent Black Mirror, the final episode of that is a lot of dual roles. I mean, everybody's doing dual roles now and interacting with each other, with themselves, which I'm in love with.
Or our friends Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin, both in big business.
I mean, I was going to say, too, going off of what you were saying a few minutes ago, it also does prefigure Divine playing the dual role in Female Trouble.
Yeah, and of course, we've got the good jokes in here about the cops, like poor Eve needs some help, and what happens? She gets attacked by a cop who's just like, oh, I'm about to make my first arrest of the night kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, cops have always been bastards. Okay, yep, we got that. And then the way that, Rhett Butler turns into a werewolf and then comes back later on at the end. Again, it's like, okay, I didn't expect to see this character come back, but sure enough. And then it was so smart because then it's somebody in a mask. We don't have to have Holly in that role again.
Well, it's interesting. There's that shot in that first sequence where it's like a deep focus shot where you see Rhett in the foreground making the drinks and then Holly in the background, Eve in the background. And it's funny, with the quality of the restoration, you can kind of tell that that's clearly a cis woman or someone in a wig playing the Eve character in the background and then Holly as Rhett Butler in the front. So it's just really wonderful, ingenious filmmaking.
I would love to know more about Tally Brown because whenever she's on screen, she just shines. And that musical act that she has is just fantastic. She just seems like she would have been a real powerhouse.
Rosa von Braunheim, the great German gay filmmaker, made a documentary in 1979 called Tally Brown, New York. And it's a documentary portrait of Tally Brown, but a documentary portrait of New York and kind of how New York is Tally Brown and Tally Brown is New York. And one of my favorite sequences in the film is, it has a couple different sequences with Tally's friends and lovers and acquaintances. And there's this one sequence that's shot at Reno Sweeney, which was a famous cabaret bar in the Village of Manhattan. And we see Holly Woodlawn do her cabaret act. And then it's just the two of them on stage together talking for about 5 or 10 minutes about how being a Warhol superstar was cool, but, no one got any money from it. And how, it's just wonderful to seeing them talking, I guess 6 or 7 years after the making of this film together. Neither of them ever really fully made it, but they're kind of enduring. I mean, it's one of the best documentaries I've ever made, but also just that sequence alone, I think is just really incredible.
I'm definitely going to have to check that out. Yeah, I would love to know more about her. Other than Tally Brown, seeing her in a few other things, and, especially, like I said, Brand X, sorry, I keep bringing that one up. It just feels very like a spiritual cousin to this film. I don't really recognize too many people from the film other than David Margulies, who, I mean, he's the guy, surprisingly, of all the people that are in this, he's the guy that most people will know. And I think most people will know him maybe from Ace Ventura, but definitely from Ghostbusters, where he played the mayor. And as soon as he comes on screen, even though it is, 12 years before Ghostbusters, he just sticks out like a sore thumb to me because I'm just like, oh, I know this face, even with the longer hair and the glasses. As soon as he starts to speak, I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy I know. And he is fantastic. His whole acting class is wonderful. And just the intensity that he brings to all this. And so many silly things happen in this movie, such as the Native American guy who can only say the word how. Can't really do much more than that, just playing the typical Native American with the arms crossed and everything. And then to find out, I'm trying to remember which actor that is, but he plays, what, like 6 roles in the movie?
I counted 8 during the final credits. Utility player.
And I didn't recognize him from one thing to another. I mean, I recognize the guy who comes to ask for the $5.95 blowjob is the same guy as the maitre d' at the club that Margot's at. But then I think maybe he's supposed to be the same guy because he talks about the blowjob, and I think they have a nickname for Margot that her name is Bargain. I think that, so I'm thinking he's the same dude. I mean, it's supposed to be the same character is what I'm trying to say.
I think if only one of the 8 characters ages badly, then I think it's a pretty good batting average.
Especially from 1972. I mean, we didn't have anybody in blackface.
And even the Joe Buck character, it's getting back to the heart aspect of this movie. So we've got Sonny Boy Hayes, who is actually a professional wrestler. He's a little person. And we get to see a full wrestling match, right? Which is phenomenal. I think it was really thrilling and really a great match in and of itself. And, his character is Joe Buck and he's dressed like Joe Buck. So he's got, he's pulling off that whole vibe. He's courting our heroine and gets really close, but he gets rejected ultimately because she's leaving. So okay, now I'm spoiling the movie. You want to spoil the movie, Mike? We're doing it. He gets rejected, but there's no obvious bigotry going on here based on his height. He's not a joke at all, which I thought was great. And of course, he gets it like, oh shit, I'm really being rejected here. And he slinks off and he's bummed out. And of course, just like tears at your heart a little bit because, he's a good character, right? Probably better than the John Voight Joe Buck in the end, right? I think it was so easy for films of this era and of this kind of tone to just be equal opportunity offenders, all that, this kind of thing. But this movie has so much honesty at its core too, that just makes it work in a way that I really did not expect.
Well, the day that they spend out together, that Joe and Eve, and then I guess it's Joe's manager and manager's girlfriend, I guess it is. The day that they spend out in New York, a different filmic technique to use this photo montage with this song going over it. And the montage lasts for a long time. And it just looks like they were having a blast going around the village. And it looks maybe like not Little Italy, but maybe Chinatown and these places. And I'm just like, this looks like a great time. I mean, even when they're in like amongst the meat, I guess it's a slaughterhouse they're in at one point, but they're like, in all these different delis with fish and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, looks like you guys had a wonderful time. Looks like I would like to be there. Like when they're going down the dock and all kind of marching along with each other and everything, because we do eventually go from photos to live action again. I'm like, this looks like you guys had one of the best days in New York you could have had.
I just wonder what happened to those slides.
Probably in a box someplace. And that they even have title cards on screen. And, there's like the opening one, but then during that kind of montage sequence, there's another one that shows up and says one more time. I'm like, that's really nice. Again, I can't imagine the joy that you must have had in the theater watching this with a whole group of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other fascinating things about this film is just the fact that it's made by the director who went on to make the hardcore Jaws parody Gums, which is, I think, surely one of the least erotic films ever made. And it's funny, like, I think there is actually a through line. That's another zany comedy. It's another one that's just really, really outrageous. I believe, did you cover this on the podcast once?
I wanted to watch Gums when we were doing Jaws, but I didn't get around to it.
Gums is about a killer mermaid who is biting the penises off of men swimming in the ocean. The Quint character is played by Brother Theodore, who is a full-on Nazi, and in real life was a prisoner at a concentration camp and is in the film playing an honest-to-God Nazi. In the final reel of the film, the characters just all become replaced by puppets. for no particular reason. It's a musical songs. And I think the thing that's really funny about Gums too is that there's a softcore version of it, which features cartoons drawn over all of the naughty material. So instead of it being a blowjob at it's a Gums brand toothpaste, or it's made to look like a toothbrush, or there's a crab on top of an underwater scene. It's the same kind of zany Robert Downey-esque humor that you see very much in Scarecrow, but really in a disgusting, naughty way. The filmmaker also produced a film by Howard Goldberg called Apple Pie, which is on Tubi, and I highly recommend checking that out too. It's another one like this that has a really loose, shaggy New York sensibility to it, and it ends with a 15-minute long street dance scene with original music by Hall & Oates.
Is this pre-smooth Hall & Oates? Is this like the rougher edge of Hall & Oates?
I think this is like pre-officially Hall & Oates. This is like the John Hall and Daryl Oates band era Hall & Oates. I think the thing that's exciting to me about a film like Scarecrow is it's the one where if you watch it and you like it, it can really lead you into all these different paths and places that you never thought you would go into. And, from this film, you get into the Jaws porn parody, you get into other New York indies like Apple Pie, you get into the Warhol world, you get into Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin and all this other stuff. It's really, really fascinating and inspiring and exciting.
The title being taken from a verse in Jeremiah, a Bible verse in Jeremiah, which is still a little bit perplexing as much as I've gone back and looked at like, what's going on here? Why is this a title? But it immediately linked to this other Bette Midler film called The Thorn from right around the same time, which is a lampoon on the Jesus story. And I imagine Teen Just from the Mighty Gemstones is happening right now, right? Yeah, just these goofy religious lampoons that I think were really emanating from this group of people at this same time. In The Thorn, Bette Midler plays Mary, the mother of Jesus. And that film ends up being a much more, it's more like sketch comedy than Scarecrow is. This suggests that there would be a lot more religious content to this film than there is, to my mind. We do have Mary Poppins doing kind of a sermon in Central Park, kind of an extended sermon. And I'm still not entirely sure what this is supposed to say about her. Is she a fake evangelist who's putting on a show? Or is there some aspect of like her moralism, which is making her like a evil agent within this seedy underground? Both of those realities seem possible to me.
The crazy thing about the title is that if you thought Scarecrow in the Garden of Cucumbers was a weird title for this film, the original title that it was shot under is The Sliding Pond.
We're going to take a break and we'll be back with a pair of interviews. First up, you're going to hear from the author of Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn, Jeff Copeland. After that, you are going to hear from the screenwriter of Scarecrow and Garden of Cucumbers, Sandra Scoppettone, and we'll be back with both of those right after these brief messages.
Hello, everyone. This is Malcolm McDowell. I just want to say that this is a request to listeners of the Projection Booth podcast to become patrons of the show via patreon.com, patreon.com/projection booth. That's pretty simple. I think you can do that. It's a great show, and Mike, he provides hours of great entertainment. So now it's time to give back, my little droogies. Settle down and take a listen and have a sip of the old Moloko. And then you'll be ready for a little of the old in-out, real horror show. Bye-bye.
I'm so curious about this new book. Why now? What brought this new one to bear?
Holly Woodlawn meant a lot to me because she was the first person in Los Angeles to give me a chance, to give me an opportunity to write. I wrote Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn because I didn't want to forget all the outrageous absurdity that we experienced My father had Alzheimer's, and I saw what that did to him. And so I just wanted to create a record for myself, just so it was still fresh in my memory. This was back in 2016. I had spent 30 years in television, and my career was winding down. And I remember sitting in my living room in Los Angeles, and I was just sitting there with a glass of wine and thinking about the last 30 years and all the shows I worked on and all the wonderful celebrities I met. And nothing compared to the magical whirlwind that I experienced with Holly Woodlawn. It was just rich and so much fun, and there was so much joy that I started writing it down. I just started jotting down notes, just random notes. And then when I got to 100 pages, I thought, well, maybe this would be an interesting magazine article. But then I got so much going on. I thought, well, Jesus Christ, surely this is not a book. What's this got to be? A novella? What the hell am I working on? A short story? But it just kept pouring out. And then before you know it, I had 400 pages. Now, I should explain that I wrote about 100 pages back in 2016, but it wasn't until COVID hit. I had left Los Angeles. I'd moved back to the boondocks in the Midwest to take care of my parents. And then COVID hit. I moved here in 2019. COVID hit shortly after. And I was on lockdown. And that's when I picked it up again. And, you know, the world was in a state of chaos, it seemed. Everything was just so awful. So I just retreated into the 1980s. And I stayed there for a good year.
Was all this from memory, or had you kept diaries of this? Because the details are fantastic.
A lot of the memories were just indelibly burned into my brain because they were so vivid and so colorful. I mean, I would never forget how I met Holly Woodlawn. I'd never forget the parties we went to once A Low Life and High Heels came out. There were just certain things I would never forget. I would never forget the fact that she disappeared. And then I had to find an apartment for her. There were just things that were just so crazy. I also had a scrapbook filled with pictures. I had like 5 boxes of archive materials with notes and not really diaries, but receipts from restaurants, for my taxes, mileage logs, cards and letters. Oddly, that I had written to my great Aunt Dorothy, and then after she died, her daughter sent them all back to me. And those were a wealth of material. Cards that I'd sent to my parents that I found when I was liquidating their estate, letters to my sisters with all this information in it. Now, basically, those served to give me more detail, but overall, I pretty much remembered everything. I remembered the party we went to where there was another writer jonesing for the project. There are some scenes like that party scene. I can't even say the word. Amalgamations.
Amalgamations?
That's it. It's my sinus headache. I can't speak. Anyway, yeah. So I would combine, say, 3 parties into one. That horrible person that approached us and gave us so much attitude was actually at a different party. There was so much material and it was so fragmented. What I did, I just had to put it into a cohesive structure. And who cares if that asshole was, 6 months later? I just put him up because it just made for a better scene. It proved the point. That was the night Holly and I bonded, was at that second party. They all blur together.
What is your process when it comes to writing books? Because it sounds like you did a lot of interviews with Holly, had audio tapes of those, but then for this one, you've got your own receipts, like literally your own receipts. But what's kind of your typical method of approaching a project?
Forgot to mention, I also have audio tapes of me and Holly working. I have video of us working together, and I have all our audio tapes. Well, most of them, of us working together. But my process is a real pain in the ass, okay? Because writing to me is so arduous. I call myself a rewriter more than I'm a writer. And what I'll do is I'll sit down and I'll just bang out the scene. maybe 3 or 4 pages, right? And then I got to go back, and I'll go back over that 10 times. I mean, I just wrote an essay for the DVD release of Scarecrow and a Garden of Cucumbers, which we're going to talk about. It was so hard. Thank God they loved it when it was done. But my thought process is all fucked up. I mean, thoughts come from all different directions, and I put them down, and they don't make a damn bit of sense. And then I got to restructure them and figure out, well, this is going to go there, and that's going to go there, and what the hell kind of point are you trying to make here? And what is your overall intent? What is this paragraph about? That kind of horse shit.
Well, you mentioned Scarecrow, and I told you before we started recording that it's been a minute since I've read Low Life and High Heels. Can you tell me a little bit of where Holly was in her career when that movie came about?
Oh, Scarecrow in a Garden of Cucumbers? Oh, yes. We write about it in Low Life. So Holly had finished Women in Revolt, and she was hired to do Scarecrow in a Garden of Cucumbers. The director and the producer really, they loved Holly. And they felt like she really was the only person who could do that role because she had a sense of vulnerability that I guess a lot of people didn't have or show at that time when it came to the trans performers. Holly was basically a mess. I mean, she wasn't grounded. The producer and the director, they paid her money to be in the movie, and they got her situated at the Chelsea Hotel. So she had a place to live. She had some stability. Because Holly never had a home. She was always couch surfing, she was just all over the board. And then she was always drinking. And then she'd run off and do speed. She was running around with that whole underground theater bunch in New York. And she was just unhinged. So they move her to the Chelsea, and Holly is thrilled. She's got to party her ass off. They shoot the first scene in a tavern. And Holly, there's a lot of waiting around on a movie. You can have a 12-hour shoot day, and you're waiting for most of it. Well, she got bored. It's a tavern. There's a fully stocked bar. So she starts hitting the bottle. She got totally loaded. And that night, when they're driving her home, she freaked out and jumped out of the car into traffic and started sobbing hysterically. I mean, she was just... God bless her, right? Now, the reason why I can tell you all this is because I just read all that material again for my essay. So it's fresh in my head. And I could see in Scarecrow where she was a little off. Because what happened was they realized they had a problem. Okay. And it was decided that Holly should move out of the Chelsea because she was partying there too much with her friends. She spray painted the terrace gold. She was just off the hook. And they moved her in with the screenwriter, Sandra Scoppettone. I believe that's how you say her name. Because they felt, according to Holly, they felt that Sandra would be a good influence on her. Because Sandra didn't drink. So Holly stayed there, and they continued the movie. And it all went really smooth after that first episode. But then filming wrapped, and Holly moved back to the Chelsea. By this time, her young boyfriend, Johnny, had come back into the scene. And that was just a lot of drama. Holly, God, she's so crazy. So they went back to the Chelsea, and they started boozing and balling and blew through all her cash. Okay, of course. And then she had to go, I guess she moved to Alphabet City and started, instead of taking acting lessons, she took up heroin.
For so long, it was impossible to see. Did you have problems when you were doing your own research, being able to see everything that she was in?
Oh, yeah. We couldn't see anything. I mean, the only film that was available that we had access to was Trash. I don't think Women in Revolt was out yet. And if it was, we couldn't get it at the video store. This is pre-internet. You couldn't just go on Amazon and order it. You had to run around and go to the various video stores. And Trash was the only one we could find. So, yeah, it was a challenge. And that film, as I understand it, was lost in a vault. So, very exciting that the Academy chose to restore it.
The stories that you tell in this new book are just amazing. And I can't even imagine how you handle that big of a personality and that difficult sometimes of a personality. I mean, you're doing things like getting her a job, getting her a place. You have to find a place that allows pets because she's got this precious dog that she just gives away at some point. And you're like, oh, her baby.
I know. How do you forget that shit? Like I said, it's like so ingrained in my memory because I really think I was traumatized. If you want the truth, it was such a challenge. I loved Holly dearly. When we were working together on A Low Life in High Heels, I considered Holly my best friend, very close. But it didn't come without its challenges. And the biggest challenge was that Holly drank. That was her big vice. She was an alcoholic. She loved white wine. Glen Ellen, that was the brand that she bought all the time at the West Hollywood, the Los Angeles Pavilions, Hancock Park. We live close to there. You know, she told me in the book, Pouilly Facé is the only French you need to know because she loved that wine, but she couldn't afford it. $4 bottle, a jumbo-sized bottle of Glen Ellen.
And to think that you're working a full-time job at the same time.
Exactly. And that's what actually made it all so special, is because there were just so many crazy, we ate off an ironing board. We were poor. It was one debacle after another. And then Holly, she gets her job at Wacko and she's only there a few weeks and decides she's got to go on vacation and takes off to Europe. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah, like I said, you're working a full-time job. You're getting occasional other gigs, writing script here, writing a piece there. And it's just, I mean, what happens after that? Like, do you blossom? Do you become like the production assistant to the stars and just like take off from there? Because I'll be honest, there's many Jeff Copelands on IMDb, and I think at least 2 of them are you.
There's one that's me and my credits aren't even complete. I'll tell you what happened is I wound up broke. Okay, on the verge of being penniless. And I had to start all over. I was 30 years old, and I wound up working on a PBS series that starred Jeff Goldblum. It was called Future Quest. And they needed a receptionist. And I landed that job. And I decided that I was going to be the best receptionist they'd ever seen. Because, I'd worked at Paramount for 3 years. I'm not sure if you get that, but I worked at Paramount for 3 years, and I worked my ass off, and I couldn't get out of that production assistant trench. I mean, I was either a production assistant or I was a writer's secretary. I didn't want to be a writer's secretary. I didn't want to be an assistant. I wanted to be a writer, or at least a producer. And so I got this job, 30 years old. I'm at the bottom of the heap once again. I get my job as a receptionist, and the executive producer, Kathleen French, said to me, 3 months into my gig, she says, you're too smart to be answering phones. We're going to make you a production coordinator. And there was another producer there. Her name was Debbie Reed. And basically, Kathleen French and Debbie Reed took me under a wing, and they showed me how to coordinate productions all over the world for this highfalutin science documentary series, very high quality. And I mean, I'm working with all these brains, these wonderful people, these great producers, award-winning people, And so what happened was Debbie Reed landed another series, and she took me over to that series. And it was another science series. It was a documentary series for the Discovery Channel. And so I just kind of hopped from being a receptionist to a production coordinator to a production manager. Then I became a segment producer, then a field director, and then a writer producer, and then a supervising producer. And it kind of skyrocketed, it's kind of climbed the hard way. I mean, I started at the bottom and worked my ass off. It was Tara Sandler and Jennifer Davidson at Pytown Productions who actually gave me the opportunity to write. They were my first writing job. I was working on It was a travel show. 2 travel shows for the Learning Channel. This is back when the Learning Channel was actually about learning. Reality TV hadn't come in yet. It was on the horizon, but it hadn't taken over like it has now. Back then everything was scripted.
I mean, you didn't sleep your way to the top, Jeff? Come on.
I know, I should say that I did, because it would be so much more colorful and interesting, actually. Yeah, so I got to work on that. Who can I say I slept with? Shelley Winters, okay? I met Shelley Winters in the supermarket, my favorite Hollywood story. This is no joke. I'm in Ralph's supermarket in Beverly Hills, and I'm standing in the express lane, and this little disheveled woman turns around and looks at me and says, she has a little plastic bag of nuts. And she says, honey, can you open this bag of nuts for me? Plastic has ruined the world. And I didn't recognize her face because she looked like a homeless person, but I recognized her voice. And I'm thinking, holy shit, this is Shelley Winters. And I have got a horror script that I've written that is perfect for her. Long story short, I told her about my script and she invited me over to her house to bring it over and chat. And then I, fucked her bug-eyed, and the rest is history. You're bringing out the worst in me, Mike. Now, she was wonderful. I never did that. I would never fuck my way into anything. But it sure is fun to think that maybe I could.
So you're writing more scripts. Are you writing other books after you write Low Life and High Heels?
I never wanted to write a book. That was never my ambition. Once Low Life was done, I was working on my Discovery Channel show, right? I'd gone on a road trip to do a shoot in Mammoth, right? And I was with my executive producer, Dana Milliken, and Debbie Reed. We were all driving back. It was a long drive. And when me and Dana are talking about our childhoods, sharing experiences of what it was like growing up in a redneck environment. And we just laughed our asses off. Long story short, she said, Jeff, that has got to be your next screenplay about your childhood. So I did. I wrote this script. It was called The Long Hair Depression. And it took about 6 years for it to get any sort of attention. But eventually what happened was Madonna optioned it. She gave me a deal on it. That script went to Whitney Houston's company as a writing sample because she needed a writer for, I think it was Sleeping Beauty. And so I was submitted. And what happened was Steve Lappick, who was her development guy, he called my agent and he said, Whitney had a drug problem. They weren't talking about it, but, she wasn't in shape to make Sleeping Beauty. And he said to my agent, do you mind if I take this to Madonna? So my agent called me and says, is this okay if he takes it to Madonna? And I'm like, well, fuck yeah. Because Madonna was, fresh off of Evita by this, she was just a force. So Madonna read it. Her manager, Carice Henry, loved it. And Carice Henry and Steve Lappick partnered up to produce it. And that wasn't the only script. I wrote, a handful of scripts. What happened is they all wound up in development hell. The joy of development hell. So what my goal is, I'm going to take every script and I'm going to novelize it. So I'm in the middle of the Long Hair Depression right now. That's what it's called, Long Hair Depression. And that keeps me busy. But that is hard.
You talk about those moments where you catch other people looking askance at Holly and just not knowing how to deal with a trans person in the late 80s, early 90s. And I mean, I so wonder what Holly would be like now. Like if she was a presence now, could she even make it in today's world with the alcoholism? Or what would you think a Holly Woodlawn in 2025 would be like?
I don't know. Because Holly was inconsistent in her acting ability. I mean, I saw Holly in the film Milwaukee, Minnesota with Josh Brolin. I thought she was wonderful. She is a riot. I loved her in Billy's Hollywood Screen Kiss. With the right material, I think she could pack a powerful punch. But Holly needed a firm hand. She needed someone to ground her. That's what I did. I grounded her. And unfortunately, in her later years, she didn't have that. Holly could be a force if she worked hard enough at it. But unfortunately, what I had to learn the hard way is that Holly shied away from hard work. So I worked 30 years in television. All those shows are lost and forgotten. Who cares? No one remembers any of that stuff. It has no resonance with today's culture. But Holly Woodlawn, because of all that's going on with transgender issues, because of her film career, and because of the internet, it blows me away when I go on the internet and I see people writing about low life and high heels. I wanted to create something that celebrated her and paid tribute to her, and something that would mean something 20 years from now. With this diversity and inclusion business being upset with the registration, okay? See, I want to know I don't think people understand how important it is to recognize a kid's identity, or who's struggling with his identity or her identity. It seems like people aren't taking it seriously. But I think Holly Woodlawn's story, especially at Low Life and High Heels, if Holly had grown up in a supportive environment, if she didn't feel so shameful, would she have run away to New York? I mean, she ran away to New York and had an amazing experience, became an Andy Warhol superstar, and that was fantastic. That's because Holly, was driven to run away. She couldn't be herself. Brian Hamilton, who was a good friend of Holly's, told me, because I went to Holly's close friends and I asked them to read the manuscript because I wanted them to sign off on it. And he told me that one reason Holly ran away from home is because Holly was adopted. Holly was born in Puerto Rico. His mother didn't have a father. The father was an American soldier who abandoned mom. And she moved to New York and met Joe Eisenberg. They married. Joe officially adopted Holly when Holly was 15. And Joe was Jewish. So he wanted Holly to get circumcised. Brian said that they forced Harold to get circumcised. And if you're an adult, a grown kid, getting circumcised is very painful. So that contributed to this Holly not feeling safe, Holly's needs not being acknowledged. If you don't get circumcised and your parents make you. And then one thing I also wanted to bring up, you'll notice in a lot of later photos of Holly, her chin is off to one side. I wanted to write about this because I always wanted to explain it, but I don't think I fit it into the story because it was just such a non sequitur. But Holly had like an abscess tooth. And this is after Low Life and High Heels been written. She might have been living with Teresa Conboy, but she went to the dentist in West Hollywood, and he's pushing and fucking around with her lower jaw. And what he didn't know is Holly had a chin implant. And she had her chin implant back during her cabaret heyday in New York. And he dislodged her chin, and it wound up on the side of her face. I mean, it's awful. So that's why you see these pictures, and Holly's got this lopsided chin. Well, a good friend of hers came into some money, and God bless him, he paid for Holly to have that fixed, that chin back.
Well, I'm curious too. You talked about going back to these older screenplays that you wrote, all these things that were stuck in development hell, which I hear from a lot of writers. It's like sometimes I talk with screenwriters. I'm like, what have you done for the last 20 years? You have no credits, but obviously you're not homeless, because they get that same sold a script here, resold it over there. But how is that for you now, revisiting stuff that you wrote earlier and now putting it in as a book?
Well, it's liberating. It's wonderful. I don't think I ever want to go back to screenwriting. It doesn't appeal to me. Honestly, it just doesn't appeal to me. I love the freedom of writing a book. There's a lot of freedom. And, with a screenplay, you got to follow that formula. No matter how unconventional you try to be, there's still a formula. There's still, these certain beats you got to hit. And in a book, you don't have that kind of restraint. You know what I mean? So the book I'm writing now, there's so much freedom. I'm just running away from the script. The script is the basis. But I discovered that, what if I just did this? And just totally fucking went off the deep end over here and did something else. There were so many stupid hurdles I had to jump through with working with people on my stories. It wasn't fun. Let's put it that way. It was more frustrating than anything, especially when you've written a personal story and it's based on your childhood and it's based on your parents. And then suddenly you got a development executive saying, let's take this character and make her more like this. Make her more like Cher. You're like, what? It's kind of disrespectful. To me, I just want creative freedom. I want to have fun. I want to enjoy writing and I like writing material that makes me laugh out loud.
But I know you say that writing is pretty painful sometimes with the rewriting and everything, which I think is very admirable because I think it was Charles Willeford that said that the key to writing is rewriting, and I totally agree with that. But I have to say that your prose style is so easy to read and so delightful because it has taken me a long time to get all the way through a book recently, other than audiobooks. But Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn, I was just eating that up. And I'm reading 50, 60 pages a night, which normally I'm doing 10 because you grab me and you keep me in there and it's just so easy to read.
Well, that's my television experience. When you're a writer in television, especially if you're doing short segments, you've got to grab them immediately. But the last show I worked on, I was the lead story producer on a show called America Now with Lisa Gibbons. And, you have to grab them instantly because it's the top story. And you just got to take them on a ride. And it's got to be a white knuckler. Everything in that story is true. But it's really all in how you craft it. Because it could have been really boring. Like the drive through California, the drive through the desert. That could have been a real snooze. But let's face it, this is a book about writing a book. How exciting is that? Me.
I've never read a book about the writing of a book like this before.
Thank you. Because you know what? Oh, God, Mike, I couldn't get people to read it. The worst thing about being a writer is when you can't get people to read your work. I wrote The Long-Hair Depression, I think in 1994, and I couldn't get it read until, 2000? That's stupid. And then they read it and they flip for it. It's just absurd. And when I was trying to get an agent to represent Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn, I couldn't get anybody to take it on. Well, there was one agent, though, who he was very complimentary, but he said that Hollywood stories weren't a big seller and he would have trouble placing it. So I respect that. You want an easy sale, right? So I am beyond thrilled that you said that. That made my day. Thank you.
Are you in a better place now? Do you have a better agent? And do you think like these next few books will be placed pretty easily?
I don't have an agent. I got Feral House because I was hustling for a publisher. I couldn't get an agent. And, what was frustrating is you would query an agent. Oh, God, here's the worst experience. Oh, Lord. I had a literary manager who came recommended, and I sent her my pitch, and she enjoyed the pitch, and she had her beta reader read the manuscript. And this person flipped for it and told me it was fantastic. So the manager couldn't wait to read it, but yet it was going to take her 6 months to read it. Well, it actually took 9. While I'm waiting, they don't want you to hustle other agents. But basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out what's the backup plan here? And Feral House was one of the backup plans. So when she finally said she rejected it, it was awful. Yeah, it was frustrating. I thought, what do you do? But basically, what I would do is I would find books out there while I'm waiting for her to respond the 9 months. I'm finding what books are out there that are similar to mine. And I buy them and I read them. And then I would contact their publisher. Well, Feral House had come out with the book on Vampira. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's called Glamour Ghoul, I believe. And Vampira, you know about this, my neighbor. So I was riveted with this book, and I reached out to Feral House with a pitch. I guess you call it a query. Well, they didn't respond. Oh, fuck, man. It was crickets, okay? I'm thinking, how is it that Feral House has not responded? So I decided I was going to go in through the back door. I was going to sneak in with a licensing request. Because if you want to license one of the photographs from their book, you got to go through a whole different process. So I reached out to them and said, hey, I'm interested in licensing a photo of Vampira for my book. I got an immediate response. And so it was from Jessica, the publisher. And I wrote her back. And I said, thank you so much. By the way, I was just curious. I never heard from you regarding my, Love You Madly, Holly Woodlawn query. And she was like, oh, it's really not for us. It's not a hard no, but if we were to take it on, it would have to be reworked considerably. And I was like, okay. I left that door open for about a year while I hustled other publishers and got more rejections. And then I finally decided that I was going to rewrite it. And I rewrote it, and I cut 100 pages out. And then I resubmitted it to Feral House. And they responded. And she said, you know what? It's remarkably better, but it's not quite there. You got to do a little work on your direction and your tone. And I was like, great. Give me 6 weeks. I'll have a new draft. Yeah. And so I sent the new draft in 6 weeks, and they loved it. Writing is a lot of work.
Well, and that's the other thing that your book really transmits is just how much work it is. Even though you don't get into the minutia of like, well, and on this day I wrote 20 pages, but there are times where it's like, I wrote these 3 pages and now I had to make it into 20. And it's just like, wow, gosh, I don't think I could do that. And I don't think I could do all the rewriting and the chopping up of my own work. I mean, just cutting 100 pages, whatever you did, it worked.
I drank lots of coffee.
That coffee house that you talk about in the book, I'm just like, that seems like it really fueled him.
Lizard's Coffee House. Yes, that was great. I loved that hangout. My friend, I met some of my best friends there. Clinton Owie, who was one of the owners. Me and Teresa, who was Holly's publicist and became her manager, we would hang out there all the time. I mean, it was just like this little scene in one of the derelict areas of Hollywood that no one would think to go to. They were all going to Sunset Boulevard, thinking they were all hot and cool. But it was really right there in that little niche. And it was just fascinating seeing Brandon Lee hanging out, having coffee because he was going on stage that night next door, or having Herb Ritz upstairs. It was just amazing.
Where is the best place for me to keep up with your work so I can actually see when this new book is available?
Well, I'll have to reach out to you because I don't have a website. I never really needed one. That might change in the future. We'll see. We'll see how successful this book is. Fingers are crossed.
Definitely fingers crossed. Well, I will sing from the rooftops to make sure that more people know about this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time. This was so wonderful connecting with you.
Oh my God, it was my pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
Please tell me, how did you get interested in writing and eventually become, writer of both children's stories as well as mysteries?
I always wanted to be a writer from the age of 5. Don't ask me why. It was something I knew. How did I become one? I just wrote. That's what you got to do. And then eventually I got an agent. That's what you also have to do. And she sold Suzuki Bean, which was the first book, which it wasn't really a children's book. It was meant for adults. It was a takeoff on certain books. But it appealed apparently to lots of children. It was published overnight. It wasn't actually published overnight. It was bought overnight. It became very successful.
From what I understand, Desilu was interested in making a TV show or a movie out of it?
He did a little pilot, and nothing ever came of it.
How did you get involved with Scarecrow in the Garden of Cucumbers?
Well, Robert Kaplan, who was the director, came to me through my agent and asked if I would do it, and told me what he wanted, and who he thought would be in it. So I thought, why not? And I tried it, and it worked for him. I don't know who else it worked for. He had very little, and I ended up, I hate to say this, but it's true, I ended up directing it myself because he didn't know how to do it. It was a mess. And so I didn't mean to take over, but the actors started coming to me for, certain things, and I sort of directed it myself. Well, it was scary, but I liked it. I liked doing it. And that was the end of it.
How was Holly Woodlawn to work with?
She was lovely, except for the first night, she was drunk. After all the setup and everything, we couldn't shoot. So Robert asked me, would I let her live with me for the remainder of the shoot, which was going to be about 6 weeks, and was 6 weeks. So I said, sure. I'm not going to be with her every second, but I'll try to make sure she's not drunk for shoots, which I did. And he picked me, I guess, to do that because I am a recovered alcoholic.
Had you had experience with directing or even writing for screen?
No, nothing. Not at all, no. A shock. Holly was a shock, but she was also very nice. I liked her.
What was it about the work that you had been doing that brought you to Kaplan's attention?
I had been doing plays at that point, little plays, small productions, and he, I guess, saw one. Wait a minute, Gloria, who was my agent, Gloria Sapphire, just thought we'd make a good combination. That's what happened. Came to her for something and offered me for help for him, and it worked out. Except, as I say, he honestly didn't know what he was doing, so sort of all fell on me, which was a lot, but I did enjoy it. And that was the end of my directing career.
But I know you had other things that were adapted as well, including the after-school special, The Late Great Me, the story of a teenage alcoholic. I imagine that was based on personal experience?
No, because I wasn't a teenage alcoholic. I certainly observed it, though. I did know enough about alcoholism to know certain things. I didn't have anything to do with the production at all. It was all done in Hollywood.
I think, was Scarecrow, was that completely shot in New York City?
Yes, it was. And we were lucky enough to get certain people. Like, I'm sure you know, Lily Tomlin did her telephone answering service thing in it, and there's a singer who came on it, and she turned out to be Bette Midler, who wasn't Bette Midler then. I mean, she was, but she wasn't. And she was also lovely. I did not work with, but I was involved. Lily sort of did it on her own, off camera, which it is. But I got to know her too, and she was also a very nice person. Everybody was very nice who was involved with it, except Robbie. Although he wasn't not nice, he just was floundering. And then disappeared with the whole thing. So it's been all these years. It was 1971. It's been all these years for me to see it.
Did you finally manage to see it again?
Yes, recently. In the last couple of months. It's an awful movie. I mean, as movies go, it wasn't a good movie, but it's certainly very timely right now with all the transsexuals and everything. I think Holly was the best actress of all of those people. Not the prettiest, but the best actress.
When you get to work with David Margulis,
David Margulis,
he ended up having a huge career.
He did, in the sense of character parts. He never became a star. David is wonderful. He died now a few years ago, I think.
And I'm sure rewatching it again all these years later must have brought back some memories.
Well, it brought a shocking memory back of how I looked then and how I look now. I just should not have seen it in a way. I was something like 36 years old. And there were friends of mine in it, too, who just, in crowd scenes and stuff, they dragged them in. So it was interesting and shocking to see some people. There's some really funny, I say it's an awful movie, but I shouldn't say that. But as movies go, it wasn't, hung together very well. But there were certainly some wonderful scenes, I think, funny scenes. Amazing what the names that I chose, that they still ring true for some. I guess some of the stuff in it is still viable.
Were you a big fan of All About Eve?
I still am, yes. I think it's one of our best. The movies, a lot of people wouldn't get that. For listeners, Joe Buck is a dwarf. Although I think that I'm not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to say little person or something.
What was the release of the film like? Was there a premiere?
Well, you could call it that. It opened at the Waverly Theater in Greenwich Village. And a few important people came, and Holly arrived with 2 doves. Imagine that. Yeah, you could call it premiere, yes.
I'm curious about your Jack Early books. Why did you end up using a pseudonym for those? Just
for 3 of them, I did because women writers are treated differently from male writers, especially books that are like the ones I wrote, crime books. And so I thought I'd try that. And in fact, I was right, because one review, for instance, not compared me, but it said I was as good as King and Elmer Leonard and somebody else, I can't remember, which no one would have said if it had a woman's name on it. Unfortunately, that problem still goes on. People in the business and people outside of business definitely look at women's things one way and men's things another way, which is too bad. All the same.
I'm sure you have faced a lot of adversity, first being a woman writer or woman anything, and then being a lesbian writer anything on top of that must have made it even more difficult.
Believe it or not, it's the woman thing more than anything else. Yes, nobody cared that much about lesbians, I'm glad to say. No, it's really the sexes that people are bothered by, which is so stupid.
Were you pretty public that it was you writing under a pseudonym, or did you try to keep that on the down low?
When I first wrote the Jack Early books, I did keep it quiet. But then little by little, people found out, which was all right, because it was already, it had already been, reviewed, etc.
What did you think of the adaptation of Donato and Daughter?
Charles Bronson would not have been my first choice, but actually it got made because of him. He was the one who wanted to do it. It wasn't bad. I mean, I've always thought he couldn't act very much, but the rest of them were pretty good. It does have a great cast, and it worked pretty well, I think. But again, did you ever see it anywhere except for something on television at 4 a.m? I didn't. I don't know why. I'm hoping some streaming place will pick it up.
Well, are you excited that Scarecrow is going to be available now for people to see?
I am very glad, yes. It'll be interesting to see what happened to it. I'm so sorry that Holly isn't around to know, because she was desperate to find that movie.
Yeah, I'm very curious how audiences are going to react to this 55 years later.
Yes, me too.
What about you? What are you up to these days?
I have a series out there, a book series, with a detective named Lauren Lorano. And I'm hoping that'll be picked up for television. It's perfect. She is a lesbian, and it presents the whole thing with lesbians as pretty normal people. Unlike many books that don't do that.
Well, I hope that definitely gets picked up. I would love to read more of your fiction.
Well, I'm not going to write any more of those. There's enough. I did short series after that, I don't know if you know, where the protagonist is a woman named Faye, because of her last name. Then it's set in the 40s. There are just 2 books. That's the last I did. But I stopped writing. And say sort of, I did stop writing. I'm getting into it. I got tired of thinking in ways to write about women, write about eyes. How many things can I say?
Well, Sandra, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Get it on.
Get it up, get it throbbing.
Get the nod from the motor.
Get the spoon.
I got to work.
Get the cool
Running
motor.
motor. Get it gunning.
Get it in.
Get it on.
Get it on. Get it on.
All right, we are back, and we're talking about A Scarecrow in the Garden of Cucumbers. And yeah, I did want to talk a little bit more about The Thorn, which I imagine had to have been retitled after The Rose got big, right? I mean, I'm curious what this movie was called before. I can't see it having that title when it came out.
So far as I know, that was always the title of it. I mean, I only saw it on a decrepit videotape many, many, many years ago. So I don't know that that's ever gotten like a full restoration or a DVD release. Somebody can correct me on that for sure. I mean, it's not an excellent movie the way that I think Scarecrow is an excellent movie. I will say that. The Thorn was definitely a film that was made to poke at people and offend, and kind of press those envelopes. An equal opportunity offender in many ways. It doesn't have the heart that Scarecrow does, which is interesting.
Yeah, I didn't get a lot of heart out of it, but it feels like a movie of the time. This one came out a year earlier in 1971. And yeah, I guess I was looking at, and I don't trust IMDb, but I was looking at IMDb, and it says that the title while they were filming it was The Greatest Story Over Told. Like, okay, yeah, we've seen all these stories before. Yep, this is good. Kind of reminded me of Wakefield Poole's The Bible a little bit with the way that it was taking on some of these themes and everything. And it also reminded me a little bit of Trey Parker and Matt Stone when they did that whole story of Aaron and Moses, just something about that sacrilegiosity that I had. But I kind of like movies from this era, especially these really corny movies. And like so many of these jokes were just so corny. I mean, when they had the director at the beginning who's playing like a Harpo Marx type character and him... What was it? They redo the MGM lion, but it's him. And I'm trying to remember what it says instead of art for art's sake. Oh, shit. It had something good written above the title of it. And I was just like, again, corny as hell, but just, it's all worthy. But I love that style of humor.
No, it is a fun watch. And it's kind of kicking this same way that Scarecrow and many, all the Waters from the World films, etc. So, yeah, it's definitely worth taking a look at. But if you're watching it for Bette Midler, you're only going to get a little bit of that.
Looking around for some of these songs, because I thought, maybe some of the songs on the Scarecrow soundtrack are available on like old Bette Midler albums. As far as I can tell, no. But there are so many Bette Midler bootleg sites and fan sites where it feels like all of these folks were like me up until just recently, where I'm like, where the hell can I see this movie? I want to see this movie. And I think anybody who's a Bette Midler fan who ends up watching Scarecrow will be like, okay, yeah, this actually does scratch an itch because they use her songs quite often. I mean, like you said, like 2 songs, then one of them comes back a few times, and they're pretty darn good songs too.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's interesting is even though she's not physically in the film, she was a pretty big selling point for it. I like how the newspaper ad mats say, hear Bette Midler sing Strawberries, Lilac, and Lime. Like, you're going to go to the theater just to hear the one song sung by her. I mean, I think one thing that is interesting about this film is just doing the post-mortem what if, or why did this not break through in the way that it should have. I know that it had a terrible advertising campaign. I have an original poster for the film, and it's the strangest poster I've ever seen for a film because it is a circle. It is a movie poster-sized circle, poorly designed with that photo of Holly Woodlawn with the tinsel on her head from the musical number. And it just says, hooray for Holly Woodlawn, Scarecrow and the Garden of Cucumbers. And it is, like, frankly, the most hideous movie poster I own. And it's just so weird that a film like this that I think has so much appeal and is so genuinely funny just, like, didn't get a good campaign and just kind of fell flat. I know that when it premiered at the Elgin Theater, which is now IFC Center in the West Village, I believe Candy Darling came to the premiere with a bag of tomatoes, like in a threatening way. And then afterwards said that she did not throw any. So I don't know. It's weird to think that this movie just never really broke through in a way that it should have.
Yeah, and the only poster I've ever seen is just that. And it's got to be just what? An ad mat? The one that you're talking about with the see or come here Bette Midler thing? That's the only media I've ever seen for this whole movie. Though I haven't even seen that ugly poster that you're talking about.
It's hideous. And the funny thing, too, is that I believe at some point in the 70s, early 80s, New Line Cinema actually distributed it for a little bit. So it got around a little bit. It just really just never came out. I think the director, Robert J. Kaplan, later wound up working in distribution. He worked on Frank Henenlotter's Basket Case. And when I asked Frank about that, we had him out for a screening for the Weird Wednesday series that I do at the Alamo in Brooklyn. And I mentioned the name to him and he started cursing like he was not happy with the work that Robert Kaplan did on Basket Case. Because I think they were trying to sell it as like a midnight movie and he did not want it to be sold as like a midnight movie. He just wanted it to be like a regular movie. But I think the really sweet full circle moment is that, like, he's someone who's very clearly inspired by Robert Downey Sr. And then he later wound up producing Robert Downey Sr.'s comeback movie in the 80s, which I believe was later released as America. It's an interesting career and just someone who's just kind of been forgotten about and then only exists in these like traces and projects that he was involved with. But I'm curious what other stories there are about him.
Well, it sounds like there wasn't a lot of love lost between him and Sandra Scoppettone. I mean, according to her, she's the one that directed this movie. So, like, oh, okay. She's not happy with what went down at all. So, history's written by the winners, I guess. So, I'm glad he's still around. I was trying to get a hold of him, but not able to. But yeah, she didn't have a whole lot of fun things to say about him. I think I just found that poster that you're talking about. Yeah, hooray for Holly Woodlawn. Holy cow. Yeah, that is a weird poster. And is the poster a circle or is it actually a rectangle with a circle in the middle?
It is actually a circle.
Wow. Okay.
And it immediately went into a tube because there's no way to frame it. And why would I want to put that on a wall? But I had to have it.
Yeah, world premiere engagement, Waverly Theater, March 19th or 15th, 1972. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah, you're right. It was at the Waverly, not the Elgin.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous that I haven't seen the announcement of the Blu-ray, though it's supposed to be coming out for Pride Month, so I'm excited for that. I hope more people finally get to see this movie because I think they're going to have fun, and I'm glad that these screenings are happening because I really would love to see this in a movie theater. I imagine it has to be similar to something like, I don't know, The People's Joker or something where you're just like, yeah, I get a lot more out of this with an audience than I do just sitting in my living room alone. All right, we're going to take another break and play a preview for next week's show right after these brief messages. That's right. We'll be back next week with a look at The Exterminating Angel. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Rahne and Elizabeth. So, Rahne, what is keeping you busy, ma'am?
I've got a new band finally, and we're starting to play out, which is very nice. 50-Foot Woman and the Worms. So if you're in the Baltimore, D.C. area, keep your eye out. We'll be playing some shows. I've got a lot of art coming up this year, which is really, really exciting. So find me on the internet, find my website, rahne.com, and sign up for my mailing list, and I'll let you know what's going on.
And Elizabeth, how about yourself?
At the time that this is being released, I've actually just had my first theatrical release through my new distribution company, which is called Muscle Distribution. It's a brand new 4K restoration of an early 80s punk new wave, female-centric drama comedy called Going Down that's never had a U.S. release before. It's really incredible film, often touted as one of the seminal Australian independent films. But it's got a really incredible soundtrack with a bunch of local punk and new wave bands. The Birthday Party has a song in it. It's just the kind of movie that I feel like is a big sort of discovery kind of a title. If you like Smithereens or Times Square or After Hours, I think people will really love it. So I think if this is out at the end of May, it'll still be in theaters and still playing around. So check out Muscle Distribution at Instagram or muscle-distribution.com. And there's a lot of other kind of fun, crazy stuff coming up. So I'm very excited for that.
Thank you again, ladies, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They are all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projection booth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over the world.
Is not in her room. Untouched on the table, her curds and her whey. She hasn't been seen since the dawn of the day when she pulled on her raincoat and ran for the train, singing strawberry lilac and lime. Strawberry staircase a princess may climb, and leaving her burdens below in the town, remain on the hilltop and never come down. Oh, call the chief usher and ask has he seen a princess asleep in the third mezzanine. Many Aprils have passed since we noticed her last, singing strawberry lilac and lime. The lilacs grow wild now all over the elm, and vines have enveloped the Astor Hotel. The garden is ravaged, the Roxy is dead, all empty and cold is the princess's bed. But high on the hill where the wild berries grow, where blackberries blossom and blueberries blow, curled up all alone in her mulberry throne, a child is asleep in the very last row. Dreaming strawberry lilac.